Hello, Deep Mindfulness Collective. This, right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York, somewhere in this direction. And if you're joining us anywhere other than twitch.tv/Deep Mindfulness, well, I got bad news for you, buddy. We are collapsing, abandoning, surrendering every other platform except for Twitch coming very soon. Okay, the volume's about to go up. I realize it's down a little. Watch this. Whoa, very advanced. Welcome, everyone. This, right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream, and apparently I have a frog in my throat, so I can speak like Barry White. Folks, very happy to be here with you. As always, it is a delight to have a little fun, hang out, have a good time, and meditate together. Today is a special day. This is a once in a lifetime / every 2 months occurrence where I give you a report back from my latest, I was hesitant to call it psychedelically assisted therapy, although that's exactly what it is. Hesitant to call it that because I feel sort of weird being like, hey, I'm going to talk to you about my therapy session. It's a little different than a little bit different than a therapy session. I would say that's pretty fair game, a traditional therapy session. Bloody Dior asked me, is this trip your best one so far? Well, let me tell you this right now, Bloody Dior. I do not answer questions from people whose locations I am not aware of. No, I'm just kidding. But tell me where folks are coming from. That's a great question. So, any questions you have about this? Was it the best so far? That's a good question. The cheat answer, real quick, is yes and no. Hopefully that is sorry. Hopefully that is helpful. We got some folks popping in. What's up, folks? We got Rory coming in from Kingston. Alex Rainleaf coming in from Portland. Man, you guys got the riots happening, right? That's happening over there now. I believe so, right? There's like solidarity riots going on there. I'd be very curious from you. Gene, what's up from Brooklyn? Good to see you here. As folks are rolling in, just let us know where you're coming from. So 2 things to throw into the chat right now. Questions that you have for the report back on the most recent psychedelic journey. If you have any questions, you can save those for later if you want, but we can also put those in now. And let us know where you're coming from. Bloody Dior, I'd love to find out where you're coming from as well. I know it's over the pond, but it's the classic American thing. Like everywhere in the UK is London. Very advanced geography over here. Folks, warning, whoop whoop. I see we have 1 viewer here from YouTube on our second YouTube channel. We got to let you know that this is the last week that we're going to be on YouTube, and we're going to be transitioning fully over to twitch.tv/Deep Mindfulness, which I'm kind of excited about. For a while I was like, I want it to be everywhere, it's easier. But something about like really like being like, we're doing it, is exciting. So this is our last week there. I would highly recommend, if you were watching this on playback or whatever, if you want to see the live version, come over to twitch.tv/Deep Mindfulness. However, the playbacks will be appearing exactly where you are, YouTube channel 2 watchers. They will be appearing on our second YouTube channel. If you are on our first YouTube channel, which I now see from our dashboard that there is 1 person watching on our first primary YouTube channel, that's youtube.com/Deep Mindfulness with no number 2 after it. Therefore, you will not see these at all. They'll be invisible there entirely in every circumstance. So, playbacks, youtube.com/Deep Mindfulness 2. Live stream on twitch.tv/Deep Mindfulness. P.S. The playbacks will not be available for 24 hours. Oh dear God. Yeah, that's generally the case. That's the rule for Twitch. We're trying to follow Twitch's rules. You can't rebroadcast somewhere else for 24 hours. So, there's people here from Facebook. Welcome, folks from Facebook. Let us know in the chitty chat here where you're located. That's always fun to know. And just know that we are switching. This is our last week on any other platform other than twitch.tv/Deep Mindfulness. So come on over. Bloody Dior in Hawaii. Why did I think you were in England or London? And I'm guessing you haven't traveled there recently because, no low travel extension. So there it is. Folks, so today is going to be the report back, but also answering your questions. I mean, geez Louise, how do I know what your questions are? I don't. I'm hanging out here drinking some delicious frothy beverage, and it's just a lovely day. It's a lovely day here in Brooklyn, and I'm excited to talk to you about this experience. It's funny talking about this stuff because it's not like easy going, like it was cool, man, and then I saw a rabbit and it, read me a poem. It's really intense. It's like really intense. So it's interesting talking about this stuff. Hey, what's up, Carl? Coming from Vancouver. Nice to see you. I've been watching a show that takes place on Vancouver Islands. I'm assuming when you say you're in Vancouver, you mean that you're living on Vancouver Island with no, water or, electricity, and you're somehow maybe generating electricity by like, I guess, do they have beavers there? I know they have otters. There's like an otter-run combine that's producing electricity for you to run your internet there. Very impressive, by the way. It's a show that takes place there. I'll talk about that later. So, folks, very excited. We're going to be meditating now for 25 minutes, and in that time, we'll all reach a deep state of transformative enlightenment, or something in between. I can guarantee you that. So finding a nice, comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the practice. How do we do that? What are you talking about, a comfortable position? I don't even know what that means. Comfortable position meaning you can maintain your body without needing to move it. One way to do this, a simple way, is to actually just lie down. Find a comfortable position. You don't have to move. But if you're going to lie down, you can't be too sleepy. Can't be too sleepy. Doesn't work that way. However, at the same time, often letting your knees be lower than your hips, letting your hips rock forward. These are the keys. We've been thinking about making a video about posture for like years, so maybe that's something that should come up soon. So finding that nice, comfortable position. I don't know why I have this urge to finish my beverage before we begin. So foamy. It's not a matcha. I already had a matcha earlier today, and I don't want to overdo it. It's a non-caffeinated, foamy drink made of Dandy Blend, if you've heard of such a thing. Okay, folks. After you found that nice, comfortable position, we are going to transition. I have something. I think there's a snake underneath my legs because something is biting me. It's a cord. Same genealogical family, Oh yeah. Smoking. Okay, finding that comfy position, and we'll begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths. Just feeling the body rise and fall. can be helpful to know that each time we begin a meditation, there's some part of us that feels it should be going a certain way. We recall past meditation or have some imagined idea about how meditation should be. But it's important at this moment to respect and be okay with the fact that this is how it is, and this experience right now is our doorway. So taking in all of our sensory data as a kind of doorway, all seeing, all hearing, all feeling, whether our eyes are open, resting on a single point, or closed, whether we're in a space that has noticeable sound or is quiet, whether the body is quite active or restful. Treating this precise experience as our doorway. Our doorway to what? Well, it's very, very simple. Our doorway to this precise experience. This very precise moment has a mysterious quality. It has everything we need in order to be deeply free, to deeply transform. So whatever the mind is doing, if it's imagining or jittering or fading away sleepily, whatever it is, know this experience, know the experience of the body. Of hearing, of seeing. There's some part of us that needs this particular moment to be different, wants some extra experience. Knowing that it's not bad, it's just another manifestation of the same nature. And beginning to treat this particular moment as a kind of home. So much of our life is spent searching and efforting, trying. Noticing as we stop trying, as we let go of a need to do anything. We can begin to know this particular moment as a resting place. This is what we've been waiting for. Just a little bit of rest. And tuning into this general body-mind system. Often we simply follow the mind. What does the mind think? In this case, tuning into the body. And letting awareness be our guide, the simple knowing of the mind, knowing the body itself. Noticing if we have a sense of looking down at the body, or if there's a sense that the body is the center of our experience. If we're looking down, it's likely the mind is centering our experience at the eyes or at the head. So considering the body as the primary sense, as though all of the world occurred to the body rather than to the head, where we seat the mind. It's as though our system were prioritizing the body. This is the first and primary sense experience. And often the mind will prescribe where the edge of the body is. So letting the sensations of the body not be confined to where the mind imagines the edge is. This might seem like a fine point detail, but effectively letting awareness be larger than our imagined sense of the edge of the body, and letting the sensations of the body ride along that awareness, expand along with it. What if body sensations were actually everywhere? And the question of where we detect body sensations, the answer is simply everywhere. And of course, at times this will be available, and at times it won't. So we're simply cultivating the times when this does appear to be perceivable. Perhaps tiny flickers or extended moments. And perhaps this is a good place to explore. If we notice the experience of a contained body, what we normally refer to as the body, located as a kind of column of sensation with limbs and a trunk. In the mind, we can use a label, body. If the mind is able to have contact with this larger expanse of sensation without particular edges, sensation more or less independent of this common cylinder experience of the body, we might simply call that open. Neither is better. They're just different. So at any moment in the mind, it might sound something like this. Open, body, open, open, body. One way to explore the relationship between these two is notice that even when we notice the localized body, it doesn't quite fit the exact location that we understand. It's more amorphous than the precise edges of the body. So these categories aren't particularly exact, and by noticing the inexactness, it helps us explore and transition. We can stay right here. This is a perfectly rich exploration. And if it seems like it might be fun or fruitful, when we detect the body being what we're describing as open, including any sense data related to old or somatically held emotions, noticing that these emotions often have their own kind of gravitational pull. Pulling and centering the body. As though they were the center of their own universe. And that's fine, they can have their own localized experience, and we can hold a large collection of sense data, perhaps even expanding past body sensation. Allowing them to be part of this, noticing if their intensity level, the level to which they're disturbing changes depending on how we hold awareness. If they're collapsed down versus if we can allow the sensations to be in a container that's larger than the physical body. And if we're in contact with this old emotion, also allowing ourselves to open to the depth of their intensity. Even if just for a moment, letting that intensity be felt all throughout the sensing system. Staying with the practice, staying in stillness. We'll end the formal practice when the bell goes silent. Before this, allowing a bit of light to enter the eyes. Eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. Letting the openness of this seeing experience show awareness a new direction to expand. And letting this particular moment be the great teacher, showing us how we might bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay. So making any adjustments you need to allow the body to be comfortable. Looks like we have a little frozen camera action, so I'll work on that. You work on making yourself feel comfy. At least as comfy as you can. Let's see if we can get this sucker fixed up. You never know. Maybe it'll just be me frozen in that silly position for a long, long time. Let's see how this works. Here we go. Excellent. Okay, folks. Now is the time, as you unfold your limbs and allow them to thaw out. Now is the time when we start finding out about your experience. What was that like? What on earth was that experience like? Very curious. Ah, thank you. My wife brought me a water. That's very nice. I got these new jars. I realized I like drinking out of large jars because my body happens to be sort of more on the giant side. Although I'm watching The Last Dance and I'm like, I'm a puny little mortal. So I realized that the ones we had were plastic. I couldn't tell if they were BPA free or whatever. So I was trying to find the exact thing I wanted, and then finally I was like, wait a minute, I'm just talking about a beaker, basically. So I have this nice 800 milliliter beaker. It's sort of like giant, but not too big. And I really like them. Plus they have this nice little drinking spout. Like a little bird feeding me little beverage. Plus, if I cared, I would know how much I drank every day, which I know I drink enough, so I'm not as worried about it, but yeah. Although, my mind is very clear about the inevitable point at which those shatter on the ground and it's hours of cleanup. I swear, if someone could invent a glass magnet, it would be a complete game changer. God, I would buy one of those for glass break cleanup. It's one of my least favorite things in the world as far as like duties one has to do is like, oh, glass broke. In college, I mean, I didn't use it unless it was true. Maybe I'd used it in an untruthful way once. But basically it was the best excuse for being late for class because, you know, in my art school, there were classes that like you weren't allowed to be late for. If you were late for, you had to go see a doctor and like get a note. They didn't care. I was very like, you know, we're teaching you boundaries. And what I was going to say is broken glass. Sorry, glass broke. Nothing I could do. Perfect excuse. Victoria Way is here. Welcome, Victoria. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. So folks, what on earth was that experience like? What happened and what do you like now? That's my big question. And my question on top of that is as follows. Do you have any questions yourself about about my most recent psychedelic journey? You may not. I can just talk about my experience, but it's always more fun to respond to questions. And we'll go from there. I'm going to be describing my own experience, what it was like, effectively from beginning to end. I can't do it in real time because it was not short. That was sort of one of the big features about it. So my team tells me that I have to alert them when I start doing this. So in a moment, not yet, putting this in the chat, in a moment here I'm going to be starting to talk about the theme that is the title of this video, which is a report from my most recent psychedelic journey. But I do actually want to do that after I answer any questions. So hit me with your questions. If you got them, hit me, and then we'll answer those and go from there. I'll give you all a second. All your burning ones. Looks like I have a drinking problem. Okay. Starting the theme now, Team Tummelin. So, this is my official report back from my most recent psychedelic journey, but do hit me with your questions as we're rolling along here. So one question that was brought up here is, was this my best trip by far, or the best one so far? So it was very particular, and I feel like they're all so particular. In a way, it's like saying, was this my best meditation so far, or this kind of thing. It's really, there's very, very particular. Was it very helpful in what it did? Yes. Did any one of the other journeys do what this one did? Definitely not. So it'd be hard to answer that exactly. So let me just lay the the groundwork here so folks know. So I have been doing this work, the psychedelic work, for about half a year now, pretty consistently. And what the work entails is working with somebody who's trained in the MAPS system, which is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. And this person is guiding me through a set of experiences in order to get to some like very core material. Now, I'm enjoying this quite a bit because it's actually showing me material that I didn't know that I, had access to effectively. And I detailed some of those experiences in previous live streams, so I'm not going to go into detailing and going through previous live streams, but what I am going to do is just give the background that this experience and these sets of experiences are so completely and radically different than any other experience related to psychedelics that I've had contact with. I've had plenty of time in my life. I've been sober for, 16 years or so now. And so I have plenty of time to know what it's like to not be on substances, and plenty of memory and experience and history with being on substances. So I have a little bit of perspective that, helps here. So the experience is so completely different from my recreational experience with psychedelia, to the point where if someone hadn't told me that it was X or Y substance, X or Y medicine, I probably would not have even known. I wouldn't even have labeled it as such. So far, the substances that have been the guide has chosen for me was at one point ketamine. Again, these are all very controlled, amounts, very, measured to my body size, very incremental sort of increasing amounts, these kind of things. I will mention, though, I mentioned this before, that ketamine is highly addictive. And so it's using ketamine as a sort of recreational substance is extremely different than what's happening here. This is, they administer it in such a way that it would be very, very difficult to become dependent on it. In large part because, the dosage and the time between dosages, this kind of thing. So ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin have been the main sort of tools that they've used. This last journey, the most recent one, was one where they used MDMA and psilocybin sequentially. And that said, I want to emphasize, this is so totally different than recreational use. It's shocking to me, having used each of these substances in the past recreationally. I wouldn't have even put them on the same category, to the point where after the whole thing was done, and I sort of because you lay there with your eyes covered and you're sort of in a very comfortable position, and a part of this lovely experience was that my wife was there for the entire thing. I was there to support, and she's has a very strong sort of ability to, work through some intense stuff. So that was lovely to have her there. But so I'm done. I sort of take the blindfold off, and I'm like, whoa, everything's so weird. And it was not even until that point that the sort of, what you might say, the hallucinogenic quality was apparent, because of the container, because of the way it was experienced. That material actually felt like just something else. It just didn't feel like hallucinogenic, so to speak. So we have some questions here popping in. Okay. Alex Rainley, I find myself wondering if this is a practice I could try to incorporate more and more into my daily life. Okay, so you're referring to the practice of meditation we did, and I want to mention that the practice that we did today was one that I was using during the journey. That was actually really helpful at a certain point. So that's part of the reason why I was tying that in, so we have some tie-in here. I don't want to go too far off track, Alex, with the sort of talk around the psychedelic journey, so I'm going to address your question in a little bit. So the setup is, I've done a lot of writing on my intentions going in. What is it that I want to experience? I talked about those in the last live stream, I believe. And I, prepare, food-wise and all this stuff. There's a lot of sort of preparation, things you can eat, things you shouldn't eat, things you should sort of prepare for in terms of your body and this kind of thing. Generally sort of sort of purifying the body in some way, eating light and eating healthy and these kind of things, making sure you're not just eating tons of like garbage, which is not that outside of the ordinary for me. But there's times when I'm like, whipped cream is what we have for dessert and that kind of thing. So we have a big whipped cream and berries sort of fun time that Raquel and I do, not infrequently. So point is, that is not what we're here to talk about. So the setup is I've done a lot of journaling. I feel very comfortable with the guide. I feel very comfortable with Raquel. I'm not really aware of what substance or amount of the substance is going to be given to me, although I had a general idea. It wasn't like hidden or something like that, but it wasn't something that I was, terribly conscious of at the time. We begin, effectively, it's like a ceremony, and a lot of the trappings of something that's ceremonial are done intentionally, in large part because the mind produces meaning out of ceremony, effectively. I was trained in producing ceremonies when I was trained to be a meditation teacher on the Dharma side, not on the sort of secular side. And there was a lot of import on ritual, and at the time I sort of like, ritual seems so like silly, etc. And the general point is that human beings are going to put meaning, we're meaning-making machines, and we're going to put meaning into things, whether it's astrological signs, or it's like things, the way that we see patterns emerging in the coffee grinds or something like that. So might as well put them someplace that's intentional, leaning it towards things that you find important. So there's a kind of ritual, there's a kind of like sort of ritualized cleansing, so to speak, that is related to using what's the name of the San Pedro? No, Sal Palo. Is that it? Palo Santo, that's what it is. Using some Palo Santo so to clear the body, and then you take them, you do whatever sort of preparation you want personally, take the medicine, and then you sort of start talking, and if you want to, I mean, in my case I was talking. A lot of what I was talking about was my internal parts, the different parts of me that I've been noticing recently and found in the last journey. Now I've been sort of aware of these parts, but they came to the foreground very clearly in the previous journey. That had one part that felt effectively ashamed, that felt like it wasn't good enough. And I realized that in order for that part to be there, to feel like it's not good enough, there has to be another part within me that's pushing down on that part that says you're not good enough. So those two parts came to the foreground in the previous journey. However, I felt sort of more identified with the part that felt very vulnerable and ashamed, and the part that felt like it was pushing it down. I was like, man, screw you. And realizing like that's sort of a judgmental part. That part is like I don't really like that part. That part is like pushy, and like it's the part where I'm like, oh, I'm mad, and like that kind of thing. When it gets upset, like at my puppy will like poop in the hallway, and I'll be like, oh, how could you do that? Like the system will flare up with intensity, this kind of thing. And so noticing, okay, that's this other part that's judging a lot of the time. So that's what I went into the retreat, or the practice with. Logistically, just so you have a sense of what happened, I can't go over everything because the first part of the journey was 5 hours long. So it's basically about 5 hours of just navigating these parts, and that was the MDMA part. And honestly, if I were to like say like what was the experience like, it just felt like the truth came to the surface. That's all it felt like. It didn't feel like, oh, ecstasy, it feels so good. It just felt like, oh, this is the truth. This part of me feels scared, this part of me feels angry, they fight with each other, and basically a lot of it was creating a dialogue between the two. I was doing this out loud. Raquel is trained in internal family systems, so Raquel was there along with the guide, and really there's parts where Raquel just sort of took the weight of the guidance, which I thought was very lovely. And the guide was there. Raquel got out of line and was like, where's my money? Or something like that. The guide could take over or something, but Raquel was very helpful and kind. Beep up is that then what occurred, beep up, is that a lot of it was this dialogue between these parts, and a lot of what came to the foreground was figuring out if these parts weren't burdened with trying to manage the world. And if you are curious about our multiple parts, what's called multiple self system, we have a variety of playback videos on the live stream talking about the multiple self system, which is what I'm describing right now. If these different selves didn't need to control the world, because basically these selves tend to experience the world as something they need to control, and if they can't, then oh God, like something terrible, something existentially threatening will happen. If they didn't need to do that, what would they want to do? And what I discovered is that the part that feels ashamed and scared, it's very good at being vulnerable. It's very good at allowing itself to be open and vulnerable in this way. And so that's what it wanted its job to do, is it would like to be able to be vulnerable in the world, as its duty. And it's like, oh yeah, that we can do that. And then the other one that was judgmental and sort of will be angry and sort of like agitated. In a way, it's like the more shameful one felt like it had more of like a sadness, sort of down-regulating feel, and the judgmental one felt more like up-regulated and like anxious, this kind of thing. And so as I'm having this dialogue between these two, the more upregulated one, which I was still sort of pissed off at, basically. It's like, why do you judge me? I feel like you treat other people poorly sometimes. You get frustrated, this kind of thing. It basically said, this conversation unfolded that it felt it was good at judging. It was good at judging things, but really it was discerning that it was good at. It could look at two things and be like, no, this one's a little more like this, a little more like that, and it wanted to be able to do that. And I said, well, listen, sometimes you do that, and it hurts people's feelings, or hurts my feelings, or it can be unkind. So if you were able to do that and it wasn't unkind to anybody, what would that look like? And they basically just said creativity. I want to be creative. I want to create things in the world, and I like, deciding, oh, it looks like this, and maybe it should look like that. And I realized that that's a large part of what would happen. And this is part of the reason why I stopped making artwork, was a lot of the discerning that would happen when I was making something. The voice would then become so critical. It'd say like, this is terrible. Like, you're terrible. Like, why are you, So I stopped making artwork. That was a pretty central, sort of aspect of it. It was this self-judgment that was experienced, and they're experiencing that judgment as though it were coming from outside of myself. So I realized these two were sort of these two, not polar opposites, but they had this sort of polar relationship. And at some point I said, hey, what if you guys were to meet and be friends? Like, how would that be? What would it be like? And this was this moment that sort of felt the most like, it felt more like this, actually felt like beyond what I had experienced. But this experience of sort of ecstatic joy was when these two were able to have contact and be friends, and be not opposing, but sort of like connected in this way. And it just felt like, oh, like what a fucking relief. It just felt like incredibly soothing. And so that was sort of the 5 hour, we're talking about the 5 hour mark. And then the guide says, okay, we're going to add something else here. We're going to use this medicine. And okay, cool. So I sort of sit up and take the blindfold off, and she says, here you go. And so it's psilocybin, it's some mushrooms. And I go ahead and I like nibble down this, this small amount of mushrooms. And it was not a lot, but it was more than zero. So I nibble, and then I'm like I lay back down. I'm sort of sitting there talking, going on similar track, and all of a sudden something switched, and Raquel, observing this, remembers thinking like, oh, okay, the other substance must have kicked in, because basically all of a sudden I started weeping. I was just like, like, because the system suddenly had contact with this well of sadness that was dramatic, like an intense well of sadness. Oh, we have here another, where are we here? We have, oh, come on, let me see this. We have a follower. Oh, okay. I have a request. Whoever just followed, please put your name. Oh, someone else followed. Nolan Richardson is following. Thank you so much, Nolan. The person who followed before Nolan Richardson, let me know in the chat who you were. I missed it. I was looking at a different screen. Thank you very much. Let's see. So maybe it was Ben Shapiro is a goat. Okay, so sup, my shroom brother. Yeah, I took a psychedelic trip. Okay, so just to catch people up, if you're just joining us, we're talking about psychedelically assisted therapy. It's different than recreational use. I'll just say that. And I too agree that it would probably be helpful for Kanye West, although Kanye has some pretty intense mental illness, and hopefully a therapist would measure that, whether that was safe or not for him to do. So effectively the psilocybin kicked in, and the beep, up, beep, up, is it just connected with this well of sadness. So it was 5 hours basically of just really, really intense weeping. That's all it was. And there were two things that came up during the weeping that were the weeping during this period that were like, I mean, really, it was just 5 hours of being in a ball, like crying, weeping, which was, very, very, very fruitful because I came in contact with this well of sadness that was there and that the system didn't usually show me. It was like sort of buried. And now I've talked about this before, the sense of the somatically held emotion that's like, here in the throat and this kind of thing, that was, has been intense. But what I realize is that the fear that I experience often, there's sort of this fear that's sort of a somatically held emotion, has nothing to do with my environment. It's just this sort of buried experience. I realize that the fear is actually covering the emotion. It's the fear of the sadness. So this process sort of put the fear aside and was just like really, really, really intensely buried in the experience of the sadness. So what that meant was, it was just really, really, really intense sadness. And it was a combination of things. So here's the two things that came up. One was that the mind kept saying, this isn't real. Like, just because you can feel it if you tap into it doesn't mean it's real. I think you're making this up. And it would say, like, you're making this up, this is not a real experience. So what that is, from my sense of what that is internalized gaslighting, internalized experience of wherever it was, a caretaker, maybe when I was, an infant or something like this, indicating that this sadness isn't valid or isn't, I have no real right to experience it. It's not mine to have. It's it's a fake experience. So that would come up. My mind would be like, this isn't real, even though you have contact with it. You just, touch that experience and it just opens up in this way. There's also this sense of it being infinite, like there's just no end to it. And like, what's the point? Like, why would I feel this? There's no possible way to get through it. And I think that was a kind of internalized, like hopelessness to some degree, but it just felt infinite. And I kept checking in with the guide and kept checking in with my wife and Raquel and saying, this is the right direction. They're like, yeah, this is good. Keep going in. I was like, okay. And I just had the capacity to do it. And I was just like diving into this really, really intense experience. The other thing that kept coming up, which was like an internalized, another internalized blockage, was that I kept thinking, if I experience this sadness, that the people that I care about are going to leave. And so I just like experience the sadness and I'd sort of come out of it a little bit and I'd be like, I'm so sorry, it's taking so long. And they were like, no, this is great. Like, you're okay, keep going. And it was very interesting because the system was very insistent over and over again, like, no, like, it's too much for them. They're tired of this. It's been going on too long. You've got to stop. It's like, okay. They say no, so I'm just going to keep going. So all three of these, which I hadn't realized the middle one that I just mentioned, but all three of these were internalized sort of thought habits that were there to suppress and keep me safe from the intensity of this emotion for all of my life, basically. And while I knew the emotions occasionally through meditation, it was just too intense, and every time I had contact with it, it would just be overwhelming and this kind of thing. It's actually partially pushed me away from wanting to meditate on that experience because it was too intense. This is partially why I started doing the psychedelic assisted therapy material. So beep up is that that's basically what it ended up being. That was the entirety. So the first section felt like the truth just came to the surface. The second section felt very much like I then had access to the sort of underlying raw emotion that was ailing me. That's all it was. It wasn't like trippy or like cool or like this kind of thing. It just felt like those two things came to the surface. And usually, my experience doing hallucinogenics recreationally is that it feels like this is not, oh, there it is. Okay. It feels like there's so much variety, so much things happening. I'm like, being constructed and deconstructed in this whole thing, occurring over and over again. But all this was the truth for the first 5 hours. And then for the next 4 hours was just allowing myself to have contact with the sadness. The cool news is, and if anyone has this experience of some very intense emotion, it felt like it was infinite. And what Raquel talked to me about, which was, it's in a pretty vulnerable place, and I was sort of like, wait, is this how it works? Like, I wasn't really using my sort of like high functioning, like, no, of course you can get through, whatever. But she said, I've been through this before, and it's not limitless. It feels limitless, but it is not. And that's actually been my experience since the journey, which has been so great, is I feel so much more easeful. Right after the next day after the journey, I had to go and like do some logistical thing at the bank, because just having to do that, and it was like, at the ATM, and they wouldn't accept my card. And then I called up Chase and was like, okay, this is what's going on. And it was like, normally would have been so frustrating. Like their system was broken, and the person's voice came through like, and I was like, hey, I can't understand your voice. And they're like, and I knew it was on their side, because then they'd put on the hold music and I could hear it perfectly. And I was on the phone with them for probably like 40 minutes, like just trying to get my card to work. And I was like, okay, I'll wait. I was just like, and all of like the usual sort of agitation that arose just wasn't there, in large part because the sadness was sort of, the underlying it was stripped away. So that was basically my experience. That's all I can think of. If you have questions about what that experience was like, or anything about that, please let me know. I know we have a bunch of chat happening here, so I'm going to go back and read those. But that is my general experience of what those pieces of chat were like. Okay, going back. Wow, we got a lot here. Nate says, now that I quit drinking, I feel like I can get high and have the multiple self form very easily. So I'm confused. Do you mean get high like puff, puff, pass? Or do you mean just like through your own meditative experience? Here's another thing I want to mention. I've been sober for 16 years. And what I found through meditation, I really like reality. I like it a lot. And every time I use a substance, whether it's like I go to the dentist and they give me nitrous, which I used to think was so much fun, and all this stuff, it feels like this yucky, cloudy thing over on top of reality. And I just like reality a lot. So when I was coming off these substances and I sort of took the mask off, and Raquel and I went for a walk in the woods and this kind of thing, it was this feeling of like, I like reality. I want to experience reality. It's so rich and so beautiful. So that was very interesting to me, that it wasn't my old experience that I just, I needed to escape reality because it was either so painful or yucky or this kind of thing. So I'd be curious, Nate, if you can clarify what you mean by that. So I'm gonna just go through these one by one, but Nate, let me know what it is you mean by there. Multiple self form very easily, quickly, deeply. Well, either way, if you can get to that, that's great. If it's through using substances, just know that will sometimes that can cloud some of a certain one of the voices. It can often be that it can get in the way. I'm not saying that it will or it should or anything like that. So let's see, a couple folks who had joined us here: Ben Shapiro, ... and Nolan Richardson. Okay, listen, everyone's welcome here. I love you guys. I'm really glad that you personally are here. I'm not personally a giant fan of Ben Shapiro, maybe the opposite, but I like you. I like you very much. So let's I'll just say that I felt like I couldn't let it slide, man. Okay. Let's see. Nolan Richard says, I fell into a painting of a lizard Buddha and entered another dimension. That sounds delightful. I think you're describing your own experience. Ben mentioned Kanye West. Ben then says, is it okay to do acid while driving? I almost hit a girl. I think you've answered your own question there. We're this far into your sentence, and I think we're there. Also, it probably doesn't help. I was drunk either, but oh well, no one got hurt. Yeah, I mean, I would strongly recommend against it, personally. I know people, and I've heard stories from people who were drinking and were like, yeah, I just need to go to the store. This is a store that's right nearby, whatever. And they sort of come to, and they're, at the police station, and then they go to prison for 20 years. And this person was able to get out in only 10 years, only a decade of their life. I think they had a 40-year sentence for having killed someone, because they really, really reformed themselves, and they really changed the way they related to the world, and basically good behavior and helping other people, and they got sober, this kind of thing. So it's just yeah, I mean, for me, it's very important to recognize, like, life is very, very important, and I value that in part by the way that I make my decisions around other people. So I do my best not to endanger folks. So that was generally what I would suggest. Although I have a feeling maybe you're not really asking the question you sort of wanted to report that you were taking acid and driving, and that was fun. But I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. So let's see here. Jumping down. Alex Rainleaf says, I think I've touched that same infinite feeling of sadness. And again, it can be different for different people. It could be infinite guilt or infinite, remorse, or any of these things. Yeah. So you're saying you had that infinite feeling of sadness. Is there a certain way we should try to treat it when it arises and when we are stuck in a weeping state? Okay. Here's what I'm going to say, and this is my larger response, because not everybody's going to be doing the same particular therapy that I'm describing. And before I answer that question, I just want to see here. I see Annie is joining us from YouTube, and I want to let you know, Annie, we're shutting off our YouTube in 1 week. Everything's going to be here on Twitch. So if you want to stay part of the live stream, come on over on Twitch on our second YouTube channel. Let me see where you can. Oh, you're on our main YouTube channel. So on our second YouTube channel, there'll be playbacks 24 hours after we do the live stream. But if you want to be part of the live stream, come on over to twitch.com/deepmindfulness and join us here. Follow us, and you'll be able to know when we go live. And I'll answer your question in just a second. So a couple things. One is our relationship to these emotions can be afflictive, and they can be reinforcing. For me, for a long time, until I sort of broke through a certain layer, and I'll have to think about what that layer was, it did feel like it was afflictive. Basically, when I would have I think the thought layer that came along with it was that I was hopeless, and that, like, what's wrong with me, or what's the point of living, or like, it just came with these thoughts. And these thoughts, especially hopelessness, can feel like a complete trap, because it's discounting, and it'll discount anything that works well, and it's just like, oh yeah, you're sad, and like, what's the point of getting help or talking to someone, and what's the point of this, and even if we know that these things work. So it took a long time to break through the tendency to basically like self-emulate, like to self-harm sort of mentally, just be like, oh, what's wrong with you, and these sort of harsh feelings, versus just letting the system feel the emotion without the thought layer on top. And that's a lot of what I tend to recommend. However, I talk a lot about, and you probably know that I talk about the window of tolerance quite a bit, and that we need to remain within our window of tolerance. And so by its nature, some of these things can be stressing and be too intense to keep us in our window of tolerance. So how do we do that? A lot of what we do is related to making sure we have support from other people, making sure we're doing so in in alignment. If we have access to a therapist, if we don't have access to a therapist, seeing if we can get access to a therapist. Ideally, maybe someone who does somatic experiencing, or someone who does internal family systems, which is a lot of what I'm describing here with this multiple self model. Someone who can really guide us through this process. That would be a very, very that would be a fruitful way to go as far as working through this. A lot of it is like knowing how much we can take and not getting stuck in a rut of this material. And that said, just being realistic. Like for me, it was being realistic. Like I've done a lot of meditation, a lot of very intensive work, and yet there is this experience that seems sort of like inescapable. It has this gravitational pull that there's almost no way of getting out of. So for me, it's getting enough support is pretty central to that, and not necessarily meditating on the experience to the point where I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. Really being very gentle about it, and sometimes recognizing that I can allow the experience to be there in the background and go do things in the world and connect with people without being overwhelmed in that way. Okay, so hopefully that is, and if you're in the weeping experience, to let yourself go there, but look out for the afflictive thoughts. Often I find that what I'll do is replace all of the afflictive thoughts with one phrase that seems to be tapping at the root of, this this experience. In the past, the phrase that I've used is just the word no, like no, no, like. So for me, that just tapped in, and that was enough. I didn't need to think like, what's wrong with you, or like, blah, there's no hope, or like whatever. Those thoughts can be very afflictive. So in a sense, we're trying to avoid those thoughts and just let the system feel the emotion, knowing that A, we have to measure, like, can I handle this? And then B, we have to measure, or we have to, like, there can be some awareness, like, we can handle it. We can actually handle it. It's like very, very intense, but it's also okay. It's okay. And just making sure we have enough support. So getting to Annie's question here, why this psychedelic experience now in your life? What were you looking for? So I just want to, again, I've been iterating this a number of times, but the key is that this is psychedelic assisted therapy. So it was, it's not just like, oh, I want to use psychedelics. It was very much that I've heard, really what it was is I heard two things. One is that they're using it successfully for war veterans who have PTSD, and that it's a successful intervention for those folks. So to me, that says it's got real world application, and that's part of why it's moving towards becoming legal. It works so well with veterans, which often, if something works well with veterans, that's often like a kind of benchmark of whether it'll get a foothold in medicine. So that's one thing I heard that. And the other thing was that I heard that there was a study done around psilocybin where they used it with cancer patients who were terminal, and they were able to dramatically change their relationship to the fear of dying. And for me, I first associated this just with fear. I said there's this incredible fear that seems to be present despite all of my meditation experience. It's still there. I've been able to sort of drain some of the pool, but it's still very, very palpable. And so that's what it was. And through this process, I realized that the fear was just a thin veil on top of the sadness. So why, it still doesn't answer the question, why did I do this now in my life? Effectively, I've been doing stuff like this my entire life and finding bits and pieces that worked for me at certain points. At one point, what that was really, really diving into the sort of 12-step recovery sort of structure, which I still am involved in. And I did a recent live stream sort of explaining that and how like I relate to the idea of like a God or this kind of thing, and that's not really a big hindrance for me personally. That's one thing. The next thing is something happened when I got married, which was just, we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. But something happened when I got married where this thought came, because Raquel and I had just been like, we don't want to have kids. Like, we just don't really want to. It's not really in the cards for us. And the thought arose for me was, what if I did want to? What if I did? One big question was, do I have the financial stability to do that right now? I looked around, I was like, absolutely not. That would be a very bad idea. I basically, just to be totally transparent, I don't have a lot of retirement money saved. We're basically sort of, our expenses and our income is pretty well matched. And I realize that that's just not going to work. Raquel's in school; her income's going to be increasing, but it doesn't really work like that. Work terribly well. So I realized financially, no. And then I was like, what about like emotionally? And what I sort of looked at and assessed was that this sadness is so intense frequently enough that I can't reliably show up for any sort of big project. Now I can totally like for the live stream, right? I can just be like, click and shut off whatever's happening for me, not in like a suppressive way, but just sort of just being in the world. And I can do a short-term thing. 'Cause hour and a half, no problem, do it, good. What'll happen then is I'll be overwhelmed because the sadness will come back, or the intensity, the sort of overwhelm will come back, and I'll need to take a break. I'll need to like sleep for a few hours, or I'll just need, but I can never predict. And sometimes it's the thing where it's here for days, and sometimes it's here for a little while. And I tried classic psych meds, and they were cool for a little while, and then it didn't really work. It sort of like was a buffer for a period, and then it just didn't work. So I noticed that capacity just wasn't there for any big project, and I knew that if I had children, that would be a very, very, very big project and continuous for many years. So I realized that if I wanted either of these, and I wasn't, I'm still a little unsure, I would have to really dramatically change my capacity. So that's really what was the driving force here, and being willing to say, okay, I'm a sober person who hasn't used any mind or mood altering substances in 16 years. Am I willing to, work with a doctor in this way, even though it's sort of like, no, normally wouldn't be something I would consider. And talking to my support network, talking to my people, talking to everybody I talk to, overall the answer was, hey, listen, give it a try. And so for me personally, it's been extremely effective, and that's been my experience. Been very, very effective. So that's basically how I would answer that question. So real quick, I'm noticing that there's some folks watching here on Facebook and YouTube. Last week, we're going to be on any other platform aside from Twitch. So if you want to know what the hell we're doing, twitch.tv/deepmindfulness. You could go there right now, save yourself the trouble, hit the follow button, and then it'll tell you when we're going live. I'll even put the ding dang, what's it called? Why is it showing me this? Okay. Okay, that is our address. If you follow that link right now, that'll take you over to our Twitch channel, and then if you want to, you can follow. No pressure, though. No pressure at all. That is where the live stream will be occurring from now on, starting next week. So, folks, without any further questions, without any further ado, I'm going to transition into the wishing portion of this particular live stream. So, folks, I have a wish for you. The wish is as follows. Right here in this present moment that you're experiencing right now, that you can experience the lovely human sensory domain. What does it feel like to be a human? What does it sound like to be alive? What does it look like? What's the experience of being alive? And to enjoy and experience that right now. To know that the experiences, the difficulties, the challenges that we're having, the emotions we're going through are very human. They're very ordinary and normal. And many, many other people have gone through these exact same experiences that we are going through right now. So whatever our experience is, knowing that there's a kind of universality to it. Many, many people have had this experience for millions of years. Millions of years have gone by having similar experiences, difficulties, challenges, excitement, fun, joy. And so to use the tools we have at hand, one of which is to reach out to friends, reach out to people we know, reach out to people who might be able to support us. Human beings are by our nature, by our physical wiring, not meant to explore and feel emotion alone. We're meant to do so in a group. We're meant to do so with other people. So as difficult as reaching out might be, just being sure to reach out to folks, say hello, ask for support, and of course enjoy your daily life. We're going to be back here in fewer than 24 hours. That's right. No, that's wrong. That's literally incorrect. We're going to be back here in fewer than 48 hours. Same time, same place. Folks, very nice to see you. Very good to be with you as always. Thank you so much for joining. And we are very excited about this next chapter of the joy of being a live stream. Coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. Folks, look forward to seeing everyone very, very soon. Bye-bye.